Hello, back again, doing more videos, and what was I going to talk about before I get this started? MMA video, by the way. So I know a lot of the MMA people have been wanting to hear something from me about what's been going on lately, and the first topic that springs to mind, really, for me, is Alistar Overeem, and I want to get people's thoughts on Alistar Overeem. I want to know what people have been thinking over the last few years about him, because there seems to be a lot of discussion, and let's bring it forth on here on YouTube. Is Alistar Overeem overrated? And that's the topic of the video. And this is interesting because I go back and I remember when I used to watch MMA back in the day, and I'd see Alistar Overeem, and he was a 205er in Japan, Pride, and I'd seen some of his fights in Holland, funnily enough. Eurosport and Bravo would always get us fights, and I recognised him from there too. And I used to see him and I used to think, God, while I pick out my nasal hair, this guy is an exciting fighter to watch, but I don't think he's an elite fighter, but he's an exciting fighter to watch, and he has entertaining fights. But I think that he is in a very deep division at light heavyweight, where there's so much talent, where it's going to be hard for him to have that upward mobility. But he is an exciting fighter, definitely someone you could keep your eye on. I remember when I'd seen him fight in Pride, and I'd seen him fight Chuck Liddell, and I remember when Chuck knocked him out, and I thought that was a great fight to watch. I loved that fight. I remember seeing him get knocked out twice by Shogun, but I never discredited him. I thought he's an exciting fighter, he comes to fight. And in a day and age now where you just have guys that, no offense to game plans, but when you get these guys, they do these defensive game plans where they don't do anything and they run in circles. And you have Greg Jackson, come on, baby, we're working the round. That's how we win the round, baby. And you have someone that likes to come to fight. I would rather watch the guy that likes to come to fight, because you pay your money to see fights, then you want to see guys who fight. And while Overeem, wasn't didn't have the best record, I like watching him fight. I always felt one thing: he looked underfed as a light heavyweight, and he looked like one of those guys that was doing the extreme things to make himself 205. And then I remember fast forwarding to about 2008, and I started hearing about Alistar Overeem a lot, like 2008, and everyone's like, you want to see what Overeem's doing now? He's gone up to heavyweight, and he's looking like a killer now. And I saw him as a heavyweight, and I was like, wow, he really looked good against Mirko Cro Cop, and he beat Mark Hunt. And he's starting to show signs and promise as a heavyweight. And obviously, as his record grew, so did his physique, and we all know why his physique grew. But he looked like an absolute killer, and he was building up this image, this image and this aura of being an absolute devastator. And he knocked out Badr Hari in a K1 fight, which was very, very impressive. Think about that, Badr Hari, one of the most exciting kickboxers ever in the world, and Alistar Overeem came out and beat him at his own game, which was a big credibility boost for him, considering what he was. And now he was starting to get a lot of talk and a lot of press behind him about him being an elite level fighter at heavyweight. And lots of people had their opinions on that, whether he was or whether he was not, because he was not in the UFC. And people would look at the quality of guys that he fought. But he, no mistake about it, he was looking very dominant. And then we go to 2009, and he didn't really fight for Strikeforce at all. I think he was injured most of the time, and they wanted to do him and Fedor. Then eventually he fought for Strikeforce in 2010, and he fought Brett Rogers. And I remember him destroying Brett Rogers. Absolutely just flinging him around like he was, a trash can, and then destroying the guy. And he looked like a killer, and he had so much momentum amongst us and the MMA world, and everyone wanted to see him and Fedor. And then that fight never happened, and then he went to K1 and won the K1 tourney, which was even more momentum for him because he destroyed Brett Rogers. He won the K1 tournament. He then destroyed Todd Duffy in like 55 seconds, had another belt. He had the Strikeforce belt, the K1 championship, the Dream title. He had a lot of momentum. He had the Reem documentary. Lots of things were in his favour. People wanted to see him in the UFC, and people were saying, I know guys that were saying that this guy would be the UFC champion, and I started to say, you know what? I can't believe I'm saying this, but it's a possibility that he could go to the UFC and win the belt there, provided he doesn't piss hot. And that's the key word, provided he doesn't get pissed hot. Then he fought Fabricio Verdum in the rematch, and that wasn't the best fight to watch, to be honest with you. I really wasn't that keen on the fight, and I know a lot of people who watched that fight didn't like it. Verdum kept dropping, trying to pull guard and trying to goad Alistar to grapple with him, and Alistar didn't really look all that good. He looked a bit tired. He looked like he got tired as the fight progressed, and didn't look like the devastator that he did against Brock Rogers. But he progressed through the tournament and wins a win. Then he fought. Well, he was supposed to fight Bigfoot Silver then. He fights Brock Lesnar. Now, this is the thing that I think, this is where a lot of things happen. He fights Brock Lesnar. It's one of the biggest fights ever, and he couldn't have had a better opponent than Brock Lesnar, the biggest star in the world. Sorry. You know what they say about guys with fast cars. Anyways, so he fights Brock Lesnar, and him and Brock fight, and it's this big fight. Lots of press. Lots of people know who Brock Lesnar is, and Alistar beats him. And I knew that Alistar could beat him style-wise with his striking and how good he is there. And Alistar beats him with his striking. He hits him with a shot to the body. Lesnar tumbles down. Overeem ends up winning. He's the number one contender. He looked like an absolute, he looked like someone that should be in the UFC. And he had now at his grasp the biggest opportunity you could ever have asked for. And Dana White talks about this tiny window of opportunity. And when it's open, you need to do everything you can to seize it. And Alistar Overeem, in my opinion, could have been the biggest heavyweight star in 2012 had he not been suspended. And this is one of the reasons why I don't like performance-enhancing drugs. Because, yeah, you can say this, that, and the other, but they also do kill guys' opportunities and chances to really blow up. And Alistar, when you think about it, had that chance. He could have been the undisputed heavyweight king in the UFC. Dream belt, Strikeforce belt, K1 tourney, beat Brock Lesnar. His pay-per-view drawing power was starting to grow. His stardom was starting to grow. And now, and he's got an exciting style to boot. He's going to fight Junior Dos Santos, which is going to be a great stand-up war. And if he beats him, that is saying something. And Overeem has the charisma and the personality to draw. And what happens? He pisses hot. And he's suspended. And he got off lightly. In my opinion, he got off lightly. And I do like Alistar as a fighter. But come on, we know what you were doing. Your actions tell everyone that you were doing something you shouldn't. He even asked for a getaway car during the time he was told he was going to piss. He's got to do his piss test. The actions there kind of hurt people, hurt his image a lot. He came back though, and everyone was saying, he's going to come back, he's going to destroy in the heavyweight division, he's going to come back, take his crown, he's going to do what he needs to do. Cain Velasquez would not last against him, and in my opinion, Cain would beat him because, as you see where I'm going, you'll know why. Overeem fights Bigfoot Silver in a fight that looks like it's going to be set up for Overeem to win. Overeem fights Bigfoot Silver, and to his credit, did not look terrible in the fight, but he didn't look like the K1 killer that we saw against Brock Lesnar. He did not look like that absolute wrecking machine that we saw against Brock Rogers. And what happens? He gets tired, he shows fatigue, and then Bigfoot unleashes the barrage on him and knocks him out cold on the ground, and he gets the title fight. And Overeem suffers a setback. And a lot of people are like, well, Overeem hasn't fought in a year, maybe he's not training effectively enough. He gets Bardahari's trainer in there. I know he trained with that team for a while and they came to him, training hard. He's got Gokhan Saki training with him. For his next fight against Travis Brown, fights Travis Brown. What happens? Same thing, where Overeem actually did look good. He did injure Brown, he did look like he could have beaten him, but his body gave up on him and he got tired and he couldn't take it anymore. And then Brown started opening up and then knocked him down with a kick and stopped him in the fight. And I will say this, those last two fights really hurt Alistar's momentum, and it makes a lot of people say, is Overeem overrated? And I do remember at one point that Overeem, Santos and Velasquez and Corn be the class of the division, and right now 3 of those names are the class of the division and 1 of them isn't. And that one seems to be Alistar Overeem. And it does look like right now that Overeem is overrated. Perhaps, let's just say the steroids and what he was taking, probably gave him that boost. Because I will say this, when he came back, physically I noticed the difference in him.
physically, I noticed that he didn't look like the giant that he looked like physically. And had that confidence too, noticed too. He seemed to be manufacturing confidence rather than actually just having it. And I think that the loss to Big Silver, what happened to him last year, all of those factors, I think that it has exposed holes in him. Now, people suddenly been like, oh, he's starting getting knocked out. No. Overeem has been susceptible to being knocked out. He did look like a destroyer. Now he's looking like that guy anymore. And he fight me November 16th. And I'm going to say, if he looks like again, I wonder what's going to happen to Overeem. And a lot of them, do you reckon he'll get cut if he loses a fight in a row in the same way that he does, and he doesn't look competent in the fight? He might get cut. And he's on a road contract, and they want their returns and businesses. And you know the UFC are like, if it was and he wasn't winning regularly, they cut him. And like a start, I could see them giving him a fight. Well, what do you think? He's a good fighter. Actually use a bad word. You can say that some word. And Alistar actually I'm gonna watch him.